Welcome everyone. Those who don't know me, my name is Peter Murphy. I head up the New South Wales Positive Rugby Foundation. With New South Wales Rugby, we're hosting this, and welcome Keith. Thank you so much for putting your hand up to help us with this this webinar, because it's an important part for us. A little bit about the obviously Keith's asked everyone to mute their mics. There will be question time at the end. Following the webinar, we'll follow up everyone with an email with some information. We will hold a whole heap of ongoing webinars on fundraising and grants throughout the year, so watch out for that. And if you are applying for grants, please make contact with us at New South Wales Rugby so that we can write a letter of support that you will need for any grants that you will go in for. So a little bit about the Positive Rugby Foundation. We're the social impact charity arm of New South Wales Rugby, and fundamentally what we do is raise dollars, and we invest those dollars on behalf of our donors back into community grassroots rugby. The areas that we spend most of our time in that area for investing back in the game is schools and juniors rugby. We spend a lot of time in supporting rugby in schools and juniors. We have a strategy in Western Sydney called Rugby Tackling Life, and these are disadvantaged kids who are running through a coaching program and then being deployed to rugby clubs to help support rugby clubs in their coaching, particularly in volunteering. We do elite youth development, Gen Blue, which is our Gen Blue program. We've got a scholarship program. We're awarding 10 scholarships this year to disadvantaged kids from Western Sydney and regional New South Wales who can't afford to be part of that program. And these are great rugby kids who have been selected in the Gen Blue Elite Youth Development Program, and we're funding them through that program. Country rugby is a big one for us, supporting regional country rugby. And you may have heard throughout COVID that we've been running the Get Talking Tour, which is our mental health program. We'll have a little bit more about mental health for clubs and for coaches coming forward throughout the rest of this year. And we look after and support women's and girls rugby, particularly Super W. We supported Super W this year, and what a fantastic win they had up in Coffs Harbour. And we'll have a major announcement in the work that we're going to do later on this year, next month, around the work that we're doing to grow the game within the women's ranks. So that's a little bit about the Positive Rugby Foundation. Like I said, please enjoy tonight's webinar. It's a really important part for us. We want to support clubs around New South Wales in getting greater funding into the game of rugby, and this is a great part of it. So Keith, over to you. Just say, on behalf of New South Wales Rugby and the Rugby Foundation, thanks mate for your support in running this webinar, and I look forward to and hope people get plenty out of it. Thanks mate.
Thank you, Peter. Good evening again, everyone. Welcome along. Let's talk about grants. Let's get you grants ready, and let's go through and navigate for you the pathway to success in terms of ascertaining the funding and getting that grant. And really looking at it, the first thing you need to be mindful of as a club is time and capacity. All too often, I get rugby clubs or any sporting entity that I work with basically doing last-minute grant applications. No. You need to look at it now with the time frame that you have, the matter of weeks left before the application due date, to plan accordingly. So it's a bit of project management, a bit of time management I'm advocating here in terms of compiling all that you need. And I'm going to ask you, it's a big long checklist. I'm going to give you lots of homework tonight, and you're going to have to delegate that across your committee and work, as I said, with Peter and getting those letters of support, not only from New South Wales Rugby, but potentially from local government as well, basically, and getting those quotes, getting all those things. So doing a last minute grant application, I can almost guarantee you're not going to get the money, because it's going to be littered with errors and it's going to be put together in haphazard in nature. So even have this as a learning point for your future grant applications as a rugby club, whether it be local, state or federal government, or even into the philanthropic sector. Think about basically a process, a plan or a procedure of what a way of writing grants in the club and designation of roles and responsibilities. I just again ask people to put themselves on mute if they could. That'd be great. Just to eradicate some background noise, that'd be fantastic. Thank you so much indeed. Greatly appreciate it. So have a project plan. Now, within this grant, they say it's optional. I'm saying it's mandatory. I think you need a project plan, and I think you need to submit one. It wouldn't be there for a reason or purpose otherwise. So I'm going to clearly delineate to you today that while it says it's optional, I wouldn't leave it out. I put one in, and it breaks it down basically of what they look for in terms of 4 pages that includes a timeline of delivery of the project, your risk management plan, because there's an expectation as a rugby club that you have a risk management plan for all operationals, Your milestones, the KPIs, the ROI, the key performance indicators, the return on investment that you're going to provide by delivering this with this grant funding, and details of the project management staff, whether it be volunteers or employees, who's going to deliver on this funding, the committee, who they are, what their skill sets are, what their experience, what runs on the board they have to do this already. So you need a project plan. And I don't mind necessarily what you have as a template or what you use as a template at any one time, basically. But you need a project plan. They're expecting one. Well, again, to reiterate, while they say it's optional, I don't see it's optional at all, basically. Okay, so it's very much basically get this done. It's very, very important. It'll stand to you in future grants as well. And that template that you have will stand to you in future grants as well. Community consultation they ask for as well. And certainly that's the people on the periphery, the neighbours, the surrounding area, basically, that are going to have any impact in the infrastructure in terms of noise pollution, environmental pollution. And they break it down basically that they want to see those consultation plans and reports, survey results. And that can be hard now, obviously, given the time frame that you've left to put together in terms of this grant. But again, use it as a learning for future grant applications, because you're going to be asked for this again and again in future grant applications, that basically you have stores not only that the club support this and the club see it as integral, but the community back this quintessentially. And then you'd have letters of support, obviously, from New South Wales Rugby, your local government authority, and other vested interest parties as well, your state MP, that people think this is a good idea. And so if you build it, they will come. That's why they want community consultation, that it's needed, wanted, desired. It's not a whimsical need. It's part of your master plan. It's part of your 5-year business plan as a rugby club, that this is where you're going and this is how you're going to get there, implementation of such. And that's what they want to see at the end of the day. So you can submit up to 3 letters from different parties within the community that basically outside of the club that have a representative or support the club in that endeavor. So they don't mind who that is. They just want to see independent objectivity, that someone else outside of the club thinks it's a good idea, not just the club at the end of the day. The letters should be from community groups that directly benefit and engage. So who you're partnering with. That could be schools, community groups, multicultural groups, Aboriginal groups, getting more women in participation going through any aspect at all of what you're putting together, whether it's disability access, women's changing rooms, floodlights, stands, scoreboards. How is it going to add value? How are you going to create an opportunity for tournaments to be held on the ground, greater training opportunities, basically more evenings, more accessibility, etc., that other groups who can come and utilize this, because the prerogative from government is that I give you $1 and you turn it into 3. Which means I don't just give it for the benefit of the club, I give it for the benefit of the greater community at the end of the day. So who else can utilize this facility that you're seeking funding for at the end of the day? That's what they want to look for in community consultation at the end of the day. Okay, so letters from government employees are represented and not accepted as eligible support material at the end of the day. So not the letter from the council officer that you're in terms of if you're on Crown land or council land, but maybe something from the mayor, something basically of that caliber from council I'd be looking for. So permission for land use, this is about the DA, okay? Now the DA ideally would be confirmed. At worst case scenario, it would be pending. And basically they want to see that you have that written approval from the landowner, basically, whoever that is, whether it be yourself or another party. And if a DA is required, it should be at least confirmed or pending at best case scenario, rather than saying, oh, we're still to submit the DA. They won't take too favorably to that at the end of the day. So you need to look at that evidence of land ownership, a rate notice, a land title certificate, and permission to use that facility if it is under the title of someone else, in an official letter decreed from them that they're happy for this project, infrastructure project, to take place at the end of the day. You're going to have to ascertain that. That's mandatory as well. So the only thing I've said so far that's pretty much optional is the project plan. But as I said, I don't see that as optional at the end of the day. Inherently, I'm expecting you as a rugby club, because you still operate as a business as much as a rugby club, that you're going to be extrapolating from your business plan, project plan, and your budget to write this grant application, that you conceptualized and designed this already, and you're waiting for the good opportunity of a grant funding to come along. That's the expectation from government in terms of grants funding. So you need to be mindful of that moving forward in this grant application, but obviously future grant applications as well. And that's very, very important, and understand that. So development status, ideally, as I said, it needs to be approved. And if not, basically, you need to have that exemption from council. Interesting enough, I dealt with one council in New South Wales yesterday who wouldn't issue a letter of exemption. Interesting. They said they didn't have a policy or procedure for doing that as such, basically, and they only issued letters of basically approval rather than letters of exemption. So just be careful to understand that, and make sure you pick up the phone and ask them that tomorrow, basically, as soon as you can. Given that garnering letters of support, garnering quotes are going to take time. People are going to necessarily expedite it for you in 24 hours. So be mindful that what's going to slow the process down for you in terms of the grant is the external sourcing of information, not you writing it, not you putting together, but garnering all the supplementaries, because they're inundated with other people looking for letters of support from them as well, because everyone goes to the same water hole and everyone drinks from the same water hole. So they'll go to local reps in terms of state or federal MPs, they will go to the mayor, they will go to basically their peak bodies, and they're going to be inundated. Now, great, New South Wales are putting up their hand and saying we're here to help, which is great. So there's your first letter of support. But then again, the other ones will be oversubscribed. So try and get in there as fast as you can. You need to upload one of the following, which is the expected development letter or certificate, a complying development letter or certificate, or a letter or certificate demonstrating DA exemption. As I said, that can be contentious with certain LGAs. So I place that phone call tomorrow with them. The budget, okay, that you can tangibly and feasibly prove that it's a value for money investment for them. There's no misappropriation of funding, does exactly what it says in the tin. And what you're going to fund is needed, wanted, and it's done in a cost-effective manner. And there's no artificial budget inflation, no padding out per se. So that means determinable quotes. The costs benefit analysis has been undertaken by the rugby club that if we build it, it's going to have a legacy for at least a number of years. We're going to get maximum utilization out of this, which is going to be great for them at the end of the day. That's what they want to see, return on the money. Okay, and they want to see that there's a value there for them, basically, in terms of that, but more importantly, a value for the community, a value first and foremost for the rugby club, but a value first and then secondary, the community at large. They can use this facility to the benefit of them as well, whether it be ground sharing or utilization of playing the game of rugby. So get your quotes. As I said, usually the last thing, and what I find normally when I'm working with clients on the grants, they're always chasing down the letters of support and quotes as the last thing. They're probably one of the first things they'll be getting, because they usually slow down that process, as I said. So try to be ahead of the race if you can on that. Letters of support are the same, because as I said, everyone goes to the same people, and they're kind of selective about who they give support to, unconditionally or conditionally. But I need to see value for money. Okay, and obviously it's understanding that if they gave you money in the last funding round, are they going to give you money in this funding round? More than likely not. If they gave you money recently, are they going to still look at you favorably? Potentially, if it's a different value offering, if it's version 2.0, if it's something that excites them that they haven't funded before, it's new, it's needed, it's wanted, it's desired. So make a statement and back it up in a grant application. Don't have a throwaway remark. You know, any good piece of grant writing is about the 3 C's, okay? Clear, concise, and compelling. Clear, concise, and compelling. That's a well-written grant application, which is quintessentially short, succinct, and to the point. Okay, that's what they want. So no waffle, no wordology. Don't talk around the subject, talk at the subject. Make a statement, back it up. So we call it impact statements. Impact statements are about 20 words or less. Indicatively show the value in the investment, basically, which is all about positive language in a grant application. We are, we will, not if, but money, if, but maybe, excuse me. You know, if you give us the money, something might happen with it, maybe. No, this is a tangible investment opportunity. So grants are an investment, not a gift. All right, and it's very much, this is a two-way street. So they want to show that you can prove that to them, that you have a business case backed up with a budget. And if you don't have that, they're going to ask for a please explain. All right. So they're asking the status of your proposed building or facility. Is it in planning? Is it DA submitted? Has a DA been approved, exempt from application, build has commenced, bushfire has affected infrastructure? Where are you? You're going to have to select one of these. Ideally, you would not be in the category of the building has commenced. They want to be in at the ground floor. They would like to give money before you set about doing the infrastructure. They don't do retrospective funding very well, nor do they want to. So they want to be in at the ground floor per se, and very much be there at the start of it, to cut the ribbon, put up the plaque and say this was funded by New South Wales government. So again, if you're already in that process, it may be detrimental to your application, to be honest with you, in terms of what they want out of it. The assessors will consider to what extent the project has a clear vision. You know, we want a grandstand or we want changing rooms, and then you leave it and put a full stop against that. What the changing rooms will have an impact because they will do this because it's the because component they're very interested in your grant application, in what it's going to lead to. So if you're going to have disability access, greater room for people with intellectual and physical disabilities to come as spectators, let alone potentially as players. If you're going to have female changing rooms, you're going to put on female teams, you're going to have a female tournament, you're going to have girls and women playing, basically all ages. That's what they want to see. They want to see a greater traction point for the funding at the end of the day. So we'll provide high quality public or social outcomes as implementation strategies for evaluating and measuring results. So you get the money, you build it, you got to measure the impact, how successfully it actually does what it's supposed to do. They'll expect that in the acquittal, in the auditing, and the evaluation, which you'll be asked if you're a successful recipient of the funding. So I talk about, as much as I say the 3 C's, I talk about the 3 R's. Research, relationship, reporting. Research what grant funding is out there for you, instigate a relationship with them before you apply, and then do the mandatory reporting, the acquittal, the auditing, the evaluation. Now, we're already past the first 2 hours, really, given the time frame that we're already in. But those who feel that they want to pursue an application, go right ahead and do it. You be mindful that you actually just might get the grant, and then there's another obligation on you, whereby you have to deliver on time and on budget, factoring in COVID. And then understanding as well that you're going to have to do reporting and acquittal and auditing and evaluation around that. Inherently for them, but you should be doing it for yourself as good governance and best practice as a rugby club anyway. That's their expectation, okay? And they want to see maximum utilization, as I said. So you need to stress that in your application. Numerics, right? Grants assessors love stats and facts, tangible data that can't be argued against. That's what they want to see. So you got to be mindful to come up with the statistics. You can't say a lot of people are going to use it. You're going to say 56 people are going to use it, or 560 people are going to use it, but not a lot. A lot's not a number. Okay, so it's very much quantify and qualify everything you're saying in your grant application. What's the vision for the project and the intended outcomes for the community? They're giving you 400 words to put together there. Average A4 page is about 250 words, not a lot of words. So old journalistic adage, count your words and make your words count. Drafting, editing, proofreading. You're not going to write this in the first version and think it's going to be amazing, right? Nor is it a test of your Shakespearean or Dickensian language skills, right? You didn't have to do honours English in high school to write a grant application. It's very much a common sense approach is what they're looking for at the end of the day. So it's very much that, again, drafting, you're going to do version control of this grant application and trying to get it down to the 400. You can never go over the word count. You can optimally go under the word count to about 10%. But ideally, I look as much as you can to get close to that 400 word mark. 350 I'll accept and above, anything less than that, no. How will you measure the outcomes and success of the building facility? So you're going to have a management plan, you're going to have an evaluation process. That's what they want a guarantee of, and that's what they want to see indicated. How does your project meet the community needs for enhanced or community facilities? Why is this needed? Why is it going to be a value add not only for the club, but for the community? You can see they're concerned as much about you as to the greater community, and now they can leverage that as well. Other people can utilize the facility, other sporting codes, other schools, other community groups, whatever the case may be. They want maximum utilization and maximum traction for this funding at the end of the day. And that's their value for money, VFM being the most pertinent acronym they love in government. The assessors will consider to what extent the project has strategies for ongoing engagement of the community participants. Again, how you're going to get a broader remit of people utilizing that facility. Consider the needs and expectations of those target groups and community partners and how those needs will be met. So you're not only servicing the need of your club, your members, your players, your administrators, but also the broader community and how they can benefit from what you're going to benefit as a rugby club. Other entities can benefit from it as well. Provides capacity building with the relevant sector. You're growing the game of rugby in New South Wales by doing this. That's what they want to see. All right, how are you doing? How is it going to add value to the club? How is it going to add value to the area, the sporting code, and the wider remit of rugby within New South Wales? And supports employment or includes the involvement and development of volunteers. They're very much, again, that if you can get some jobs out of this, whether it be part-time or full-time, in the construction, please show me those jobs in terms of numbers. And then obviously volunteers will add greater capacity for people to service that and bring more volunteers and more people will come to the club. It will increase your membership and increase your players, regos. So very much basically that's what I want to see as well, that if you build it, they will come, as I said earlier on. They also want to consider that it's well planned with appropriate approvals and risk management. Government is risk averse in terms of funding, right? Any perceivable risk is a blemish in your application. So you got to mitigate it and mediate it. You got to have a risk management plan. Okay, you got to relate to it basically and show indicatively that everything we do as a rugby club is measured against risk, and we quantify and qualify the risk so we can mitigate it. Has realistic timelines completed. You can't say we're going to do it in 6 weeks because construction doesn't happen that quick. You got to be realistic in terms of that as well, and it has to be completed in 2 years, obviously, which is achievable for most clubs. But be realistic about that time frame, particularly if it's a major piece of work as well. Will be delivered by an organisation with appropriate administration, management and governance. This is what they're testing you on as a rugby club. And they will always test you on this in every grant application you're putting in. Your administration, your management and governance. And this is what you're selling as a rugby club. So as much as they see you as a rugby club, they see you as a business. Profit, loss. So they know where you want to be. So you need to sell yourself that you have articulate programming, planning, the right people in the right roles, making the right decisions. That's what they want to see and hear. Has strategic partnership and collaborations across the sector. It's not just about you, it's about greater community participation. Again, schools, community groups can come in and utilize this facility. Has secured future operations and maintenance plans. Then it's going to lead to something even bigger and better down the line, basically, potentially. Maybe you have a master plan, and this is just the first section 1 of that master plan in terms of what you want to do in terms of ground redevelopment or dressing room redevelopment or whatever you want to do in terms of drainage or infrastructure or anything of that nature, or car parking or clubhouse development, whatever you want to do. Sell them that. Tell them that at the end of the day, basically, and what you're going to be doing. And it's going to improve the future operations of the club and the sustainability. 2 big words they love in grants applications: sustainability and innovation. That you're an innovative rugby club that thinks outside the box and delivers outside the box as well as inside the box, and that you're sustainable. You're going to be here in 5 years as a club. That's what they want as an assurance at the end of the day. They're not putting money down a black pit. So what are your strategic partnerships and collaborations with other organizations you've established? They don't like silos in government. They don't like you being on your own. So this is where you have to leverage how you're working with New South Wales Rugby and the Positive Rugby Foundation potentially, and other vested interests, local government authority. You're working with them, you're working with schools, you're working with Aboriginal groups, you're working with multicultural groups, all for the game of rugby, because it's health and well-being, it's getting people physically active to the great game of rugby, and that's the conduit for the community, and that's why the rugby club is so important in the community. That's what you got to sell, and that's what you got to back it up. You got to outline your club's administration, governance and management experience in delivering these size and nature of these projects in the past, and even just running the club. What are your plans for future operations and maintenance of that building or facility? Pretty blatant what they're asking for there, pretty matter of fact, nothing they're surprising at the end of the day. What's it going to be improved? What is it going to lead to for the club and for the community? Always remember that when you're writing this grant application. Again, every grant application, club and community, not just club is what you're selling. When scoring the budget, the assessors consider the extent the project has a detailed and accurate budget. So make sure it all stacks up and racks up in terms of your budgeting and the figures that are there. Provides value for money and realistic for scale and impact of the project. So value for money, pretty obvious, but it's scale and nature of it, that you're not actually looking to build the new sports stadium in Sydney, that it has to be realistic in terms of expectations, what you're asking for, and it's quantifiably needed right here, right now for this rugby club and the community at large. Demonstrates an appropriate use of public funds, so no misappropriation of funding, and diverse income from other sources and own contribution. They're expecting you to put your money where your mouth is. They're expecting you, although blatantly not asked, to put in a financial contribution, optimally 10 to 30%. And they're expecting you that no problem with, and they're expecting you to have applied for other grants or fundraising or sponsorship or other sources of funding, whether it be bequests or crowdfunding, to put that money towards this project. They're not expecting a please or some more ask from you as a rugby club. They're expecting you, it's not a handout, as I said, it's not a gift, it's an investment. They're expecting you to put in contributory funding or in-kind support in some way, shape or form. And if you're putting in-kind, dollar value of that as well. As appropriate provision contingencies, things go wrong with infrastructure projects, all right? So it's not just poor weather or acts of God or COVID, but you're going to factor all of those in terms of your project plan and your management of such. They'll want to see that. And includes insurance and other liabilities. That's very much tick the box for government, dot the I's, cross the T's, that value assurance that they want to see at the end of the day. So what's required? This is a synopsis, kind of a checklist, printed out, laminated, stick it on the club bar. Capacity building, you need to be capacity building for your club, the game of rugby and the community. You have a sustainability that as a club that you're going to be there in 5 or 10 years, and this is why you're building this. You're creating a profile for your business, and I use that word deliberately, even though you're a rugby club, because you're still a business, you're profiling yourself. A grant application is a glorified sales pitch. And what I ask clients all the time is, do you know how to sell yourself? Because that's what they're testing you. Planning your grant application, the amount of work you're going to have to do, version control, drafting, editing, proofreading. Be proactive, not reactive. Not just look at this one grant and go, right, job done, don't have to look at them again till next year. There's at least 200 or 300 grants on the horizon you should be looking at as a rugby club. Indicatively, it's coming down the line from state government, basically, that you need to be aware of, that you need to put these processes in play now and use this as a learning for the future grants that we're going to see later on in the year. Being able to do the acquittal of the grant, have a project plan, a business plan, and your budget, your CapEx that you're extrapolating from, you're pulling the info out of, and you're populating into the grant application. And your application connects with me, communicates quite clearly what the ask is, and shows me how you're going to deliver on time and on budget. And what makes for a successful proposal, obviously within this funding of what they're giving you money for, is what you're applying for. So make sure you meet the eligibility and the criterion, and you're eligible to apply. Sufficient documentation supported with facts. Again, make a statement, back it up, right? Don't be like if, but, maybe, as I said. And I've seen all sorts of grant applications over the years, which have been whimsical, not well resourced, not substantiated. It devils in the detail in a grant application, okay? A project that reflects people's needs and organizational needs. As I said, club, community. It's not just about the club. If you keep the whole narrative in the grant application that's just about the rugby club, you're not going to get the grant. If you talk about the club plus the community, the wider attraction for the community of this facility, then you have a very good sporting chance of getting the grant. So think about club plus community. Why are projects declined? I could spend all evening on this, by the way. So I've just tried to synopsize it down to 2 slides. These are the common denominators why people get knocked out of the ballpark in round 1. And as you read through them, there's nothing there quintessentially surprising, all right? It's very much don't fall into these pitfalls. This is where most people let themselves down, all right? So the second one didn't grab me as important. There's no wow factor to it. You know, you need to impress me in a grant application in terms of the value and nature of the project and what you're putting together. You know, not just we need a dressing room. Well, what size dressing room? What kind of dressing room? Does it have disability access? This is for women, basically. What is it because it's a poor standard? You know, I need to see the drawings. I need to see basically the architectural drawings. I need to see the drawings anyway. All that stuff needs to be uploaded. You haven't done the consultation. It's poorly written. You don't match what we're asking you to match in terms of objectives of the grant itself. You go off left of field or go off on a tangent. The budget, basically, you're asking for too much money, or even in some instances, I've had people not asking for enough money and not asking for enough money to actually deliver the project. And I'm well cognizant of that it's going to cost you more and you're not asking for enough money for it. You haven't coordinated with our individuals or organizations in terms of the value of this for the community at large and substantiate that. The funding source does not know the capabilities of submitting the proposal, basically, because you haven't sold it in the application. You're too ambitious by trying to build basically a massive stadium when realistically that's not what you should be doing with this money. You didn't follow the guidelines, insufficient evidence to back up what you're saying, and evaluation procedures inadequate, that you don't have one. You haven't mentioned that you have one, and basically what it's going to lead to for you is a benefit for them and benefit for you as a rugby club at the end of the day by doing this process undertaking such as well. They want that value assurance. As I said, your grant application should be clear, concise, and compelling at the end of the day, or short, succinct, and to the point. Less is more is your prerogative when you're writing a grant application. Okay? People have this compulsion to write as much as possible in a grant application, right? And people who write grant applications, I can safely say this, write the longest sentences known to man, right? No, please, cut it short, cut it in half at least, and understand that basically less is more. You can say a lot in 20 words rather than the 50 words, because you're going to chew through the word count pretty fast because it's an online application, right? Not doing the old days of hard copy here. This is online. So we don't even count words anymore. We count characters. It's a glorified tweet, what you're writing at the end of the day. So you're going to chew those pretty fast. That's version control and drafting. You got to be mindful of that. Very, very important in terms of that. Okay. So again, what they're trying to achieve is what you're trying to achieve. You need to be singing off the same hymn sheet as them. All right, so that means researching the background to why the grant's being conceptualized, what it's there to achieve, what they want you to do, not just applying for the sake of it because you perceive it as low-hanging fruit and it's easy money. Grants isn't easy money. It's a very difficult process, a very competitive process. You know, the one guarantee I can give you this evening is what? Well, rejection. You're not going to get the grant because it's so competitive out there. And it's the ones who take this and understand this as a club committee and a club group who plan a year in advance, because this is recurrent funding, right? This is grants funding rounds that come up again and again every year, basically. And it's rugby clubs that are proactive, not reactive, are the ones that are getting the funding, basically, because they have a plan, a process, a procedure, and even personnel. They appoint someone on the committee to manage this process, or they bring in a grants writer to help them, whatever the case may be, okay? Again, just if you wouldn't mind, if I could ask people to mute themselves just to eradicate the background noise, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. How do you collaborate with others? As I said, how do you play nicely in the sandpit? All right, it's very much don't be a silo as a rugby club. Look at partnerships. It's what they want to see more and more. So whatever your views and opinions are on that as a club, you're going to have to subscribe to what government want you to do now. You got to step up to the plate here in terms of community partnerships. They call it community capacity building. And I think it's something you should be subscribing to as a rugby club as well, to understand that. Okay, that'd be great if you could. Sorry, guys. Again, if I could ask you just to keep mute, that'd be great. Thank you very much. So the need for funding, talk about the commercial potential of it, what it's going to lead to, that basically this is something that's needed not only for the club, but for the community at large, as I said as well. As I said, two acronyms they love. VFM is value for money. They always want to see that in a grant application when you're dealing with a government entity. And WFM, what's in it for me, basically, all right? Which is, you may be surprised by that, but it's obviously like, why should they fund rugby? Why should they fund this rugby club? Why in this geographical area do we need to do this? Because you're going to sell it to them. They may not even know you as a club. Now, they probably will to a degree, obviously, but you have to take that you're an unknown entity in that regard and sell it from that first point of origin. This is a club going places, doing something, and this is why you need the money. And you have a growing participation rate and a recurrent participation rate. It's so important. They need to fund you for what you're actually asking for. Your management capability, they're now asking for bios, so the caliber of people that sit on committees and boards, people have experience in delivering on these projects of size and value, and the local, state, or national benefits. In this case, it's the state benefit, basically, the knock-on effect for not only the sporting code overall, but for obviously within your own geographical area, that you're going to have a great, fantastic sporting facility or element to that sporting facility that's going to benefit the community. First and foremost, always still the rugby club, but then bilaterally the community as well. So know the program rules, plan your application, be creative but honest. Don't say you can do it in 2 years when it's going to take you 3 years, basically. Try look at scalability and look at what you can do. Research successful grants traditionally. Look at who they've awarded funding to in the last funding round indicatively, and for what projects. What are their flavors? What do they like funding? And get a flavor of that. And look at those rugby clubs that have got funded already. Provide the information required, no more, no less. That's all I want in a grant application. Answer the question you're asked, not what you think you're asked, and no superfluous information. You either answer the question or you don't. It's that clear. So it's about telling a story, painting a picture with words. In fact, grants now and grants writing is business storytelling, which is where you come from as a rugby club, where are you as a rugby club, and where you're going as a rugby club. That's what they want to see and hear at the end of the day. Again, don't do last minute grant applications. Inherently, it's not going to add value. There's going to be mistakes. There's going to be errors. You're not going to have enough time to proofread it. So understand, get away from that last minute at 5 to 5, pressing send and hoping for the best. Be proactive, not reactive. Don't wait till the last minute to submit or start writing your grant. All right, ideally, you're going to start tomorrow after tonight. People can only help you if you know you exist. So profile. Get those people to circle the wagons for you in terms of letters of support to substantiate what you're trying to do, making them aware of that. Very, very important. And then basically cultivating that relationship again with the funding body moving forward. All right. It'd be very good if you could do that. All right. Much appreciated. All right. Sorry, guys. I just ask you to stay mute again if you could, please, just to eradicate the background noise. Thank you. So quintessentially, this is your first template when you're writing a grant. Okay. It's the 5 W's. Who are you as a rugby club? What do you do? Where do you do it? When do you do it? Why do you do it? And how much money do you want for it? In some way, shape, or form, you're going to get asked those questions in a grant application. Predominantly, you're going to get asked why. Why this amount of money? Why you as a rugby club? Why where you're based? Why now? So this is your first template. You're really going to answer these questions in the first and foremost in terms of answering a grant application. All right, it's always about this. So start with this as the first template to make sure you have answers to these, because the answers you have to these, you can traverse into the grant application then as well. Talk about using an investment rather than a gift. As I said, grants are not a handout, they're an investment. And talk about, use the term deliberately an investment in a grant application, because it is an investment. Don't dwell on problems, focus on opportunities. Grants are given for solutions, not problems. You can quantify the problem to about 30% value. The rest of your grant application is 70% about solution. And that if you get the money, you're going to come up with a solution to the problem. Too often, I see rugby clubs and other sporting entities writing me a grant application as an assessor, where all I see is the problem and never give me a solution. You're never going to get the money. You need to give me the problem and the solution, because I'm only going to fund the solution. I'm not going to fund the problem. Okay, and a realistic assessment of the urgency. I know you probably wanted to do this 12 months ago. COVID got in the way, didn't have the money basically. Doesn't mean you rush it. It's basically understanding that it's still going to take time to deliver on this and make sure that what's feasible 12 months ago is still feasible now. Just have that realistic expectation for yourself. So they'd like to talk about project rationale, why it's needed. In your grant application as you're writing it, you need to justify and continually reiterate to them why the rugby club needs this. Right now, right here, why is this a great investment opportunity, and justify that to them. And in order to do this, you need to break it down. Community consultation, describe the specific situation, opportunity, problem, issue that your project addresses. Clearly and concisely demonstrate a relevant or compelling problem exists, and that you have the solution and you can alleviate that or support that towards the solution. And you support your statements with qualified third-party research or other evidence to substantiate it. So back it up. Not only you saying it's needed and important, but other entities in the community and New South Wales Rugby and local government authority are all saying the same thing, that this project is needed to be funded. And it has to fit in with the planning. So you obviously would have to have conversations with your council to say, hey, what, you know, if they are owners per se of the facility, what's their master plan? What's their 5-year strategy? Is it going to contradict this, putting up something? Are they going to allow you to do this at the end of the day? It has to fit in with that planning determinable, because state government will go and source that information themselves anyway, and has to be a natural correlation there. And again, include that compatibility in your argument. Again, you're working at this as a joint project in different facets and different ways and shapes of form with your local government authority, with New South Wales Rugby, with other vested interests and other parties that are going to have an involvement in this facility moving forward. So project timing, this is me just testing you on time management. This is where rugby clubs kind of in twofold. One, they don't get the application time frame right. Everything's last minute application, but then don't get to the delivery point if they're successful in garnering the funding. Unrealistic expectations that they can do this in the time frame that they've set. So again, make sure you get that right. Now you have 2 years to do this, so you think that would be enough latitude, but given COVID and given anything else that's likely to happen as well, be realistic in your expectations of when you would start building this project if you were to ascertain funding. Budget, carefully price everything, make sure it stacks up, as I said, basically, make sure you're requesting for money is in line with what you can request money for, you're eligible to apply for at the end of the day, basically, and it's a test that you have the ability to go and source the relevant quotes. It's a test that you're able to have financial processes when your club is no misappropriation of funding, and you've done this to a degree in the past and scale and nature of a project of equivocal size. That's what they really want to know out of the budget, and it provides value for money for them in terms of investment. So again, you got to weigh up, are we asking for too much, too little? That we need to look at, again, that cost offset as they've been advocating themselves, that you're sourcing this project through alternate revenue streams as your contribution, basically, as well as other basically seeking funding, supplementary funding to backfill now for that. And the lower percentage of funds sought, the better chance of attracting the funding. So you got to look at how much you're realistically asking for. Do you ask for everything? No. Do you ask for the optimum amount? Yes. What is that optimum amount that you must come to as a clear determination as a club? So again, look at offsetting costs, and I've just given some incidentals there in terms of equipment. Obviously, this is more geared towards infrastructure, but it's same with that, whether you can get in-kind support, whether it's a builder, tools, resources, an architect's going to do plans for you pro bono because they're a member of the club or a past member of the club, or their kid is going to the club, whatever the case may be. They love to see that. That is a club has the aptitude to resource themselves, not have everything as a financial outlay in a budget, that have actually been cost effective and resourced it in a better way per se. So include inflation factor and projected salary increases. If there is going to be a salary component, basically, quintessentially, you're talking about the building project over 2 years, so there will be obviously graduated expenses if it's going to be over a period of time. Make sure you factor those into the equation when you're doing the budget. So beware of including even minimal costs if not related to the project itself. Should relate directly to the project. Otherwise, I see it as artificial budget inflation, and I don't take that too kindly at the end of the day because it's not project related. Why am I funding something that's not project related? I'm not going to fund something that's not project related. So again, retrospectively, don't like if the project already started. I'd rather, as I said earlier on, be there on the ground floor. So don't start anything until you signed the contract of agreement after you've been awarded the funding, and don't start until they tell you to start the project at the end of the day. Okay. Methodology. Quintessentially, it's the last bullet point. There should be a clear pathway linking individual stages of your project, how you've conceptualized it and how you're going to deliver it. So it's becoming more and more a predominant feature in grants and methodology that you give a clear description of how the program is going to work, how you're going to do the building program and what it's going to lead to, the timeframes, the logistics, the resources that are going to be used. They want to see all of that. Now, what you have obviously is restrictive practice here because you've got all of this and you need to squeeze it into 400 words. That's where you need to draft. That's where you need to edit. And I'll tell you that what they really like as well is subheadings and bullet points where they can clearly ascertain the information. So I don't need long-winded sentences. I need those bullet points. I need the stats and facts. I need the infographics basically in supplementaries, but I need those bullet points to really highlight the fact of what you're saying. And a project plan, what I wanted to share one with you today is 5 or 6 that I give out to my clients, and I wanted to share one that I hand out. So your project title, less than 10 words, optimally 5, to be honest with you, no more. Your project summary is 100 words, and in that 100 words, because I'm scaling it to the word count that you're going to have, that they want, which is only 1, 2, or up to a maximum of 4 pages at best. In the 100 words, and you can be, depending on the latitude you're given, if it's a couple of pages, it might be get it out up to 200 or even 500 words, the purpose, the scope, the people involved in the project, the financials, the timescales, the risks, and the implementation. Because the full project plan or full project description is 1,000 words encompassing all of that. That's what they're expecting. Because you need to get above the parapet and get it move from there in the pile, the middle of the pile, to the top of the pile in terms of ascertaining funding. This will be a highly subscribed funding round. Always is, always will be. From a multitude of community, not-for-profits, and other sporting codes. So it's competitive, as I said earlier on. So you need to be that competitive. You need to be professional as a rugby club and see yourselves as a business, basically, as an investment opportunity. Outside of that, this is where the bar has been set now. And some would say it's unrealistic, but it's where it is, no matter what. And it's just trying to increase the capacity of sporting clubs, in this instance, rugby clubs, to be the best they can potentially be. And realistic around their governance and their board and their best practice and their change management and their succession planning and all of that. Because in some way, shape, or form, they're testing you on that. So Commonwealth Government Grants Administration. Now, Commonwealth Government, obviously federal government, still pertinent and apt for state, still pertinent and apt for local. So what I'm saying here, you can see how much they love the words effective and efficient in Canberra. But basically, this is what they expect from a grant application and grants administration when you are actually receiving the funding. So I would implement these 7, we call them 7 commandments, but the 7 key principles basically that you need to look at. A lot of what of this I've touched on already today. But this is what they expect from you as a rugby club. Because you're not just a rugby club. You're a valuable community entity. You're a business. So they expect you to be professional, not amateur. So the last 3 there. And again, back to their favorite number 7, VFM, value for money. So these 7 are you're quintessential to your success moving forward as a rugby club, not only in ascertaining funding, but in terms of government relations and working with them as well on future projects. This is what they're expecting. So the top 10 tips in terms of writing a grant: make it about them, show the return on investment for them, not just return on investment for the rugby club in the community, but the return on investment in terms of investment as a strategy. Answer the question. May sound blatantly obvious, we'd be surprised the amount of people that don't answer the question in a grant application, go off on a tangent, never answer it, leave a blank space, put in NA is not applicable. I've seen it all. Try not to waffle. Don't go off on a tangent or use waffle or wordology or basically blue sky statements. Don't want to see any of that. Make it clear what's in it for them, the return on investment. Be direct and a matter of fact, and be deliberate in your word choice and what you say and how you say it. Avoid sweeping statements. They say nothing and add no value to the application. Give great examples of how you've carried out a project of equivocal size and nature in the past and how successfully you did it, you undertook it and delivered it on time, on budget. Remember, looks can kill. What do I mean by that? Well, if it looks like a sloppy application, must come from a sloppy rugby club. So I do judge the book by the cover, and I am pedantic when it comes, I'm a bit of a grammar Nazi, to be honest with you, when it comes to typos. So it's very much make sure you proofread it and edit it before you submit, please. Jog their memory. If you worked with them in the past or received funding from the past, remind them of that in the grant application. And an old journalistic adage, make it word perfect, count your words and make your words count. Make sure you go back and do a final read through, a proofread and an edit at the end of the day. Very important. That's me and the contact details. I see some people in the chat room having questions, so I'm going to take those first before opening up. Feel free to unmute yourself thereafter. Thank you, Amanda. Much appreciated. Yes, Amanda, this is being recorded and I'll be sharing that with New South Wales Rugby, who will be sending out to all participants that are here tonight. We may have been hacked, Bruce. That is true. I was having certain suspicions myself. There you go. Thanks, Jason. Just reiterate that basically. That was sent out as well. How often is the grant available? Lucy, there's potentially another round of it again at the end of the year, basically. Optimally can be two to three times in a year, basically. But again, it's club grants quintessentially. It's the off gambling. So obviously you should be looking at club grants anyway as a club. But again, I would say to all clubs to have a grants calendar to look indicatively what funding is out there. And certainly I'm working with a number of rugby clubs that are setting up their own sporting foundations or using the ASF or using Positive Rugby Foundation. I'm working with them, which I advocate quite strongly. And then basically looking at philanthropic opportunities as well, basically. But it really is about having a grants calendar, knowing what's come up at local, state and federal level that you should be applying for as a rugby club at the end of the day. Okay. No worries, Amanda. We'll get the copy out to you. Yeah, but look, it's for the future. It's a learning point for the future anyway. Certainly it'll be applicable for the rest of the year's funding and into next year as well, basically. Anyone, any questions now? They want to mute themselves and pick my brain? Any requests for Riverdance or Irish jokes? All parts of the service. How am I doing, Peter? See, Peter's even got a more Irish name than me. How about that, right?
Exactly. Keith, that was fantastic. I've taken a number of notes. Encourage questions. Those who join us late, those who don't know me, I head up the New South Wales Positive Rugby Foundation. I just want to say, Keith, on behalf of New South Wales Rugby and the New South Wales Positive Rugby Foundation, thank you, mate. You've been a great inspiration of knowledge, help, guidance, security that it can be done if we plan it and execute it accordingly. So any questions, anybody?
Feel free to pick my brain. I'm here to help.
Hi, Keith. It's Amanda Carter. I've got one question. Thanks for a really good webinar.
Thank you.
In terms of if you've got a grant and you're not going to fulfill on time, what's the best approach? Obviously, reach out to them in the first place, but what sort of evidence should you supply to them to ask for that extension?
They expect, as I said earlier on, that you're going to be tracking this evaluation begins day one, not day end, Amanda. So they expect that you, through this process of self-evaluation and tracking and monitoring and appraising, that you have acknowledged that there's a problem or there's a bump in the road per se. They want early acknowledgement as early as possible. Now, they usually only expect an evaluation basically after the project's been completed, essentially, but that some of them, certainly the Office of Sport, appreciate updates or getting them invested, because again, I'm advocating that you have a very close relationship, professional relationship with them in terms of what you're doing and how you're doing it with their money at the end of the day. So I think you need to have full disclosure and talk to them openly and transparently about what you're doing. It will invigorate the grants process and invigorate the relationship you have with them moving forward anyway. So the expectation is the earlier the better. and even give them and get them involved. Some of them like to come out and do a site visit on some of the projects as well to see how it is. So again, be more professional, be the most professional you can be as a rugby club at the end of the day, because that will mitigate any mindset they have that, you know, you're about to drop the ball, and that's their worst fear at the end of the day. Is that okay?
Fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Keith, Glenn Sanford here.
Yes, Glenn.
Keith, is this money? It's the club's poker machine money, effectively.
Yeah, Office of Responsible and Gambling. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So that in the category 3, that gets delved out by the state government, does it? Not by the clubs themselves.
Yeah, in this case, an interest will be the state government evaluate, but the clubs have obviously a part to play in that as well, obviously, at the end of the day. And I would advocate Glen anyway, as a rugby club, to have a good working relationship with them, because there's obviously category 1 and category 2, depending on eligibility, you might want to look at as a club opportunity for funding anyway, in terms of the community funding that they hand out. Category 3 is infrastructure. So the first 2 categories are not, but this one predominantly will be through the New South Wales Office of Responsible Gambling. So it'll be them controlling this, not the clubs.
Yeah, the reason I ask is that we don't have any clubs in our area, in our local government area. So I think it's category 1 or category 2 gets divvied up by the local council. But category 3 is different by the sounds of it.
It is, yeah. And category 1 and 2 is substantiated based on the relationship you have with both the council and the clubs. It's very much that relationship's all important, because I attended those award ceremonies, and you can see, I'm not saying they play favourites. They're more, you know, transparent than that, basically, and more open about that, more ethical about that. But it's very much that basically a lot of it's substantiated by having a working relationship with the general manager of the club in category 1 and category 2, and understanding and utilising club facilities for AGMs or award night, and basically working with them as a community. Yeah, right. And working together as both community entities. And that's what they want to see at the end of the day. So be mindful of all 3 categories. It's a great question. Thanks for asking it. Because you need to look at all 3 and the viability as a rugby club, not just, I mean, everyone will go for category 3, obviously. But certainly if you're doing a project of community traction, so a number of rugby clubs that I've worked with or other sporting entities in the past, they may be doing an Aboriginal engagement program, they may be doing a multicultural program, depending on where they are. They may be doing a women in sport program. You know, they go to the club, and number 1, they'll talk to the club about sponsorship. Number 2, they'll talk about using club facilities. And number 3, they'll look at saying, look, just to give you a heads up, keep an eye out for an application, because we're going to be applying for community funding for this. So people can only help you if they know you exist. Profile, profile, profile. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yep. Thanks, Keith. Jeff Ollerton from Tamworth. We approached council last year and talked about getting grants funding, and they suggested we work through them, do the work and give it to them, and then they'd put it in. So I'm a bit confused by that now.
Oh, you can. They can. You'll see from the previous funding rounds, Jeff, there'll be a lot of applications from local government authorities, because obviously it's on their site. They own the facility, they own the sporting entity itself, basically, be on local government land. So that's why a lot of them are applying, obviously, for this. Now, you can obviously go down that route and get them to be the lead applicant on behalf of the club. I presume then you're on council land, is that correct?
Yes, we have a lease, but the facilities belong to us. We've built them all, built everything.
Okay, well, interesting. That's good then, because obviously they've shown insight as a council that they still want to support that moving forward, and they want to value add. Have they talked about increasing capacity because they want a greater leverage in terms of other sporting entities using the facility?
No, they haven't, but we told them that last year we had 9 other sporting organisations using our grounds. Oh,
that's great. That's a fantastic news story. Yeah, look, I'd reciprocate. If council want to be the lead applicant on it, let them, I'd say, negotiate terms and conditions and make sure you're asking them pertinent questions of going, why do you want to be lead applicant and what are we getting out of it as a rugby club in terms of what you're asking? I presume it correlates that what you want is what they're happy to apply for. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, then I'd pursue it. Let them do the heavy lifting on it if you can. Certainly given the time frame in this funding round, I think it's fantastic that they're extending the arm of friendship there, basically. And certainly I'd be happy to reciprocate and shake their hand in it.
So, okay. And so you talked about this funding round. So pardon my ignorance. It's too late, pretty much too late now for this funding round.
It could be tight, yeah. To be honest, I'm not talking from your point of view. I'm talking from council's point of view, given COVID and everything else that's going on, basically invested interest. So, I mean, place the phone call tomorrow. see what the response is. Basically, if they can expedite it in the next couple of weeks, let's go for it. And I'm happy to talk to you offline if you want to follow up with me in a conversation regarding that. But yeah, if you place the phone call tomorrow and say, look, right, happy to accede to this. Let's, ratify an MOU here or a working arrangement around this and ratify it. And then let's proceed with the application. They can get it across the line quite quickly because they have the resources of doing that within council. And I'm speaking that as an ex-council grants manager myself. So they can expedite quite quickly and fast, probably quicker than you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
When does it actually close? Sorry, the application.
We're looking at the 26th, isn't it? Stop share. I'll bring it up to you now. Actually, let me just.
Monday 26th.
Yeah, 26th.
Yeah.
August.
For July for this round.
No, July for this round.
Oh.
Yeah, tight. That's why I'd be getting council to write it, Jeff.
Yeah.
Sorry, did someone else have a question there as well?
Oh, sorry. So it's open a couple of times a year. So obviously this one shuts on the 26th of July, which is a bit tight if we haven't really got anything going yet.
Correct.
So if we just look at the club's grant website and that will show when all the grants are available and closing dates?
That's correct. That's right. Sorry, who am I speaking to right now?
Oh, sorry, it's Lucy.
Lucy,
Thompson.
sorry. Thanks, Lucy.
Sorry, yeah.
Yes, the club grants will have that information, but your local government authority will have that information on their website as well.
Yeah.
But they should have anyway. And if not, contact them basically. And obviously, Peter, you New South Wales Rugby will be promoting it as well, correct?
Correct. Yeah, we get notification. We'll send it out to all clubs as well.
Great.
Yeah.
There you go.
And another quick question. So if we're applying for the grant and you're talking about community participation and I guess community involvement, is it favourable if we have a soccer club and a cricket club that also want to use the facility, but we're applying under the rugby code?
It is.
Yeah.
But they want to see what that ground sharing arrangement is.
Yeah.
And how it works feasibly. That there's no basically interceding on any one sport, you know what I mean? So it's basically that everyone gets their fair share of utilisation of that facility. It's in fact indicative of what they'd love to see in most cases, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, perfect.
No worries.
Keith, if I can,
yes.
Yeah, Rob Harris here from Port Macquarie.
Hey, Rob.
This might help also with Jeff with Tamworth. We worked in for the council the last few years, and we've just had all the upgrade done to our facilities in Port Macquarie to the tune of about 3.25 million. We got new change rooms. We've got 4 change rooms now for both male and females. We worked in with the cricket club plus the junior Sharks in Port Macquarie. Plus there's other clubs. They did a whole big, they made it like it's a secondary ground, but we had to put a lot of numbers in. And what basically got our grant over the line application was the use of women involved in rugby and the number of people and the ladies participating in rugby, plus the juniors. We've now gone to, from just the old days of reserves and first grade, now to 6s, 8s, 10s, 12s, all the way through, plus women's and things like that. So it's now becoming quite a big business to manage. So that might help Jeff with his application. To working with the council is by far the best way to go, especially with these big grants like that.
Yeah, exactly.
We got electronic scoreboard and everything out of it, so we come out of it quite well.
I'm confusing you with Santa now, to be honest with you, Rob. You just keep
it's like Santa was the government. We just took the presents.
Yeah.
Rob, it's Lucy from Albury. Can I contact you after? Because that's quite similar to what we're wanting to do, like getting change rooms for the women, because we don't really have very good change rooms for women, and we're also incorporating the cricket club and the soccer club. Yes,
that's fine. So what's the easiest way to contact
you?
Just
put it in the chat room right now while we're still live, basically. It's the best thing, so I can take note of it. But for both parties here and for everyone included, that's the way to go forward. You need to, in every way, shape or form, you always need to be working with council. And if they see it as a priority in terms of their works calendar or what they want to do as a sporting master plan, which we're seeing in certain areas around New South Wales, like Dubbo, Coffs, Albury, Wodonga, Wagga, they've been identified as sporting areas, basically sporting hubs in conjunction with other sporting codes. That's where you need to be basically and work through that as such. And I'd advocate that you work through that. And that's what I guide a lot of rugby clubs and other sporting entities through, to have that process, that policy, and how to undertake government relations and get out there. And Rob's just given us a perfect example of how to do that. Thanks, Rob. Anyone else? Final call for questions?
Hi, yes.
Question,
I'm from
Keith.
a rugby club in Wagga. We share the grounds with another club, but we're on a university campus. I was just wondering if the application is best to come from the university
Yeah,
or
it would
both
be, yeah.
of our clubs.
Yeah. Ideally, a joint application to show capacity of both entities, but since it's on university, look, Liz, you can get that letter of dispensation from the university that are happy for that to be done, but it's whether you can expedite that. But ideally, I would advocate that it would be a bilateral agreement that both of you are moving forward together in this.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
You're welcome, Liz. Thanks. Ross, you had a question?
I did, and it's on the dry subject, possibly in the whole discussion, but there's talk about those risk management processes and the risk management plan. And I find them a really painful and difficult process to go through, and especially to maintain once you've got one. I'm wondering if you've got any tips on whether it's just best to have a risk management plan for the project, or whether the club needs to do it, and if so, what's the best way to go about one that you can maintain? Because we've had them and they lapse, and then they are part of the risk in the end.
Yeah, good question. And they are not the most interesting thing to ever walk the planet, but they're essential. They're the most essential ingredient because it's a test of your governance and best practice as a rugby club at the end of the day, basically, and for any business at the end of the day. So you need to resource it continually. You need to update it continually. And that's where you're right, where most people lapse at the end of the day. They don't do that. So you need to look at a continuance around that, basically. And that comes back to the board and make sure that's done as part of their working ethos and etiquette. And that's always on the agenda in some way, shape or form. I'd put it on the agenda continually in terms of where you need to be, basically. So that's the latter part of the question. What was the first part of the question again?
Well, I mean, what sort of format and what process do you take to get one together?
Oh, look, they're not expecting the world in terms of this. They're only expecting one that's basically, 4 or 5 pages, basically, again, breaking down the identifiable risks and showing a risk matrix and how you're mitigating those risks. So identifying the risks and what you're doing to alleviate those risks and at what value. So high, moderate, low. So they just want a matrix. They just want to see that scale a bit. That's all they want to see. It's really a test, Ross, that you've actually thought about it and you're doing something about it. Because you know what they normally get? They get rugby clubs going, mate, no risk to this project whatsoever. And they're like, real world out there, mate, if you open the front door. So that's what they normally see. So they don't want that. They just want to see the due consideration that you've actually gone, hold on a second, something might go wrong here and we need to have a plan for it. That's the plan they want to see.
Great, thank you.
No worries. All right, anyone else before we leave it?
Yeah, Alan Ryan from Parks. Thanks for the plug.
No worries.
Yeah, wish us luck. We haven't had a clubhouse for 10 years, so that's what we're hoping for.
Oh, well, I'll do a whip around tonight if you want, basically. I'll get everyone to put in a virtual dollar here and we'll start from there.
I'd appreciate that. Thanks very much.
There you go.
Yeah, good start. No, thanks. Great presentation.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Thanks for everyone for attending tonight. Thanks for giving up your time. Get that grant. Stay safe. Good luck with it. And please contact New South Wales Rugby for that letter of support as well. Thank you. Take care of yourselves.